Texas isn't just about oil and cowboys anymore. Beneath the sprawl of Houston's skyline and the glass towers reshaping Dallas, a single Indian family has quietly built an empire so vast that most Texans don't even know they're paying rent to them. While tech billionaires buy ranches and celebrity investors flip properties, this dynasty has been methodically acquiring the infrastructure that makes Texas run. Hospitals, office complexes, energy facilities, and entire neighborhoods. They don't seek headlines, they seek land. And in a state where everything is bigger, their ambition might be the biggest of all. Before we reveal who they are and how they did it, make sure you're subscribed because we're tracking the families and fortunes that control America from the shadows. The family we're talking about is the Patel family, but not just any Patel family. This is the branch led by the reclusive billionaire Kalpesh Patel, who arrived in Texas in the early 1980s with an engineering degree and a dream that had nothing to do with Silicon Valley. While other Indian immigrants were heading to California to join the tech boom, Kalpesh looked at Texas and saw something different. He saw cheap land, exploding population growth, and a business-friendly environment that didn't ask too many questions. He started small, buying a single motel off Interstate 45 between Houston and Dallas. It was a dump. Peeling paint, broken neon sign, the kind of place where truckers paid by the hour. But Kalpesh didn't care about the building. He cared about the deed. That motel became the seat of an empire. Within 5 years, he owned 12 motels across the state. But he wasn't interested in being the motel king. He was using the cash flow from those properties to study the market, to understand zoning laws, to build relationships with local politicians and bankers. By the early 90s, he made his first major leap. He sold half his motel portfolio and used the capital to buy a struggling medical office building in the Houston Medical Center, one of the largest healthcare complexes in the world. That single building put him in a different league. Doctors don't miss rent. Hospitals don't go bankrupt overnight. Kalpesh had found his formula: acquire essential infrastructure in growing markets and hold it forever. Today, the Patel family controls over 15 million square feet of commercial real estate in Texas. That number is bigger than most publicly traded real estate investment trusts. Their portfolio spans across Houston, Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio. They own medical office buildings adjacent to every major hospital system in the state. They own the buildings where your kids go to after school tutoring. They own warehouses that Amazon leases. They own the apartment complexes where young professionals live when they move to Texas for jobs. If you've lived in Texas in the last decade, you've probably interacted with a Patel-owned property without knowing it. Their wealth is estimated at over $4 billion, but because they operate through a web of limited liability companies and family trusts, the true number is nearly impossible to pin down. What makes the Patels different from other immigrant success stories is their invisibility. They don't give interviews. They don't donate wings of museums with their name on it. Kalpesh Patel has never appeared on a Forbes list, not because he isn't rich enough, but because he's structured his empire to avoid the spotlight. His children, now in their 30s and 40s, are equally private. They attended University of Texas and Rice, got degrees in business and law, and immediately joined the family operation. There are no Instagram accounts showing off penthouses or private jets. The family lives in a gated community in the Houston suburbs. Their cars are nice but not flashy. Range Rovers and Tesla Model S sedans, not Lamborghinis. This is by design. In Texas, where tall poppy syndrome can make you a target for lawsuits or political scrutiny, the Patels have perfected the art of the quiet empire. Their strategy revolves around 3 pillars. First, buy in the path of growth, not where growth has already happened. In the early 2000s, when everyone was buying in downtown Dallas, the Patels were buying in Plano and Frisco, suburbs that were just starting to boom. They acquired land for shopping centers, medical buildings, and mixed-use developments years before the population exploded. By the time those areas became hot, the Patels already owned the best parcels. Second, focus on essential services. They don't build luxury condos or speculative office towers. They build the buildings that communities can't function without. Dialysis centers, urgent care clinics, dental offices, physical therapy centers. These tenants sign long leases and rarely default. It's the real estate equivalent of investing in utilities, boring but bulletproof. Third, never sell. The Patel family treats every acquisition as a generational hold. They finance conservatively, keeping debt levels low so they can weather downturns. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, they didn't panic. They went shopping, picking up distressed properties from over-leveraged developers who were forced to liquidate. One of their most impressive moves was in Austin. In 2012, when Austin was just starting to become the cool city that California refugees would flock to, the Patels bought a 100-acre tract of land on the outskirts of town for $20 million. Everyone thought they overpaid. The land was raw, undeveloped, far from downtown. But Kalpesh had done his homework. He knew the city was planning to extend a major highway corridor right past that tract. He knew Tesla was scouting locations for a factory. He knew that Apple and Google were expanding their campuses. So he sat on the land and waited. By 2020, that 100 acres was worth over $300 million. They subdivided it, sold parcels to corporate developers, and kept the prime lots for themselves to build a massive mixed-use development. It was a masterclass in patience and information asymmetry. The Paddles also understood something that many flashy developers miss. In Texas, relationships matter more than contracts. Kalpesh spent decades building quiet alliances with local power brokers. He joined chambers of donated to community hospitals, and sponsored youth sports leagues. He never ran for office, but he made sure that every mayor and city council member in the cities where he owned property knew his name. When zoning decisions came up or when permits needed approval, the Patel projects moved through the pipeline smoothly. This wasn't corruption. It was strategic community integration. He made himself useful. When a hospital system needed to expand but didn't have the capital to buy land, Kalpesh would offer to acquire it and lease it back to them. When a city needed a developer to revitalize a blighted area, he'd step in with a proposal that checked all the boxes. He became the guy who got things done without drama. The family's expansion into energy infrastructure is where their story gets even more interesting. Around 2015, Kalpesh's eldest son Ravi took the lead on a new vertical. He noticed that as Texas's population boomed and its renewable energy sector exploded, there was a critical shortage of logistics facilities near wind and solar farms. These facilities needed warehouses for equipment, office space for engineers, and housing for workers in remote areas. Ravi started acquiring land near major renewable energy projects in West Texas. He built modular facilities that could be leased to energy companies on short-term contracts. It was a high-margin, low-competition niche. Within 5 years, the Patel family became one of the largest private landlords to the Texas renewable energy industry. When the grid failed during the winter storm of 2021, their facilities were some of the few that maintained power because they had invested in backup generators and microgrids. That reliability made them even more valuable to tenants. But the crown jewel of the Patel empire is something most people will never see. It's a portfolio of ground leases in downtown Houston. A ground lease is one of the most powerful tools in real estate. You own the land under a building, but not the building itself. The building owner pays you rent for the land, often for 99 years. It's a structure that generates income for generations without any of the headaches of property management. In the 1990s, when Houston was struggling with an oil bust and downtown real estate was cheap, Kalpesh quietly bought the land under several older office buildings. The buildings themselves were owned by other investors, but Kalpesh owned the dirt. Those ground leases now generate tens of millions of dollars a year in passive income. And when those 99-year leases eventually expire, the buildings revert to the landowner. The Patels are playing a game that will pay off for their great-grandchildren. Their approach to wealth preservation is also rooted in a specifically Indian financial philosophy. Kalpesh grew up in Gujarat, a region known for producing some of India's most successful business people. Gujarati business culture emphasizes long-term thinking, family unity, and diversification. The Patel family operates as a joint family office, meaning that all major decisions are made collectively. Profits are reinvested into the business, not siphoned off for personal consumption. The second generation isn't just inheriting wealth. They're being trained as stewards of a legacy. Ravi handles acquisitions and development. His sister Priya manages the legal and compliance side. Their younger brother Nikhil runs the property management operation. It's a well-oiled machine where everyone has a role and ego takes a backseat to efficiency. The Patels also benefit from timing and demographic tailwinds that are almost impossible to replicate. They arrived in Texas just as the state was transitioning from an oil-dependent economy to a diversified powerhouse. They bought property just as the population was exploding, driven by Californians fleeing high taxes and companies relocating for business-friendly policies. They invested in healthcare real estate just as the baby boomer generation began needing more medical services. And they planted roots in a state that has no income tax, minimal regulation, and a cultural affinity for entrepreneurs. Texas was the perfect incubator for a family that wanted to build big without being bothered. Their influence extends beyond real estate. The Patel family has become a quiet force in Texas politics. They don't run super PACs or host flashy fundraisers, but they are consistent donors to candidates on both sides of the aisle who support pro-growth policies. They've funded scholarships for underprivileged students at the University of Texas and Houston Community College. They've donated medical equipment to rural hospitals. They've quietly bailed out small businesses during the pandemic by offering rent deferrals and flexible lease terms. This isn't charity for charity's sake. It's reputation insurance. In a state where public opinion can shift quickly, the Patels have inoculated themselves by being seen as good corporate citizens. One of the most fascinating aspects of their story is how they've navigated the complexities of being an immigrant family in a state with a complicated relationship with immigration. Texas is a border state. Immigration is a hot-button issue. Yet the Patels have managed to build an empire without ever becoming a political target. Part of this is because they came legally, on visas, and built wealth through entrepreneurship, not government programs. But it's also because they've been careful to frame their success as an American success story. Kalpesh often tells a version of his journey that emphasizes hard work, risk-taking, and belief in the Texas dream. He doesn't talk about the systemic advantages of being able to access capital or the networks that helped him scale. He talks about the motel, the long nights, the gamble. It's a narrative that fits perfectly into the Texas mythos of the self-made man. But there are cracks in the facade. In 2019, a lawsuit briefly pulled back the curtain on the family's operations. A former property manager accused the Patels of systematically underreporting income to avoid taxes and of using shell companies to hide assets. The case was settled out of court and sealed, so the details never became public. But it raised questions about just how much of their empire is visible and how much is buried in legal structures designed to obscure ownership. This is a common tactic among ultra-wealthy families. It's not illegal, but it does mean that the $4 billion estimate is probably conservative. The real number could be significantly higher. The future of the Patel Empire hinges on the next generation's ability to adapt. Texas is changing. It's becoming more urban, more diverse, and more politically polarized. The real estate market is also shifting. Remote work has reduced demand for office space. E-commerce is killing retail. Even healthcare real estate, the Patel's bread and butter, is facing disruption as telemedicine grows. Ravi and his siblings are aware of these trends. They're starting to invest in data centers, logistics hubs for last-mile delivery, and senior living facilities. They're also exploring opportunities outside Texas, looking at markets like Phoenix and Nashville that have similar growth trajectories. But the core philosophy remains the same. Buy what people need, hold it forever, and stay out of the headlines. The Patel family story is a reminder that in America, the biggest fortunes are often built quietly. While tech founders get magazine covers and Wall Street traders get movie deals, families like the Patels are accumulating land, the one asset that can't be replicated or disrupted. They prove that you don't need to invent the next app or go viral to build generational wealth. You just need to understand the fundamentals of supply and demand, have the patience to wait, and the discipline to avoid the temptations of ego and excess. In a state as big as Texas, there's room for many empires. But the Patels have carved out a kingdom that most people don't even know exists, and that invisibility is their greatest asset. Who do you think will be the next immigrant family to build an empire in America? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the world's hidden fortunes. What's particularly striking about the Patel family's model is how it defies conventional wisdom about wealth building in the 21st century. We're constantly told that the future belongs to tech entrepreneurs, to people who disrupt industries and create entirely new markets. Yet here's a family that has built a multi-billion-dollar fortune by doing something ancient and unglamorous. They buy land, they hold it, they collect rent. In a world obsessed with growth, disruption, and innovation, the Patels have succeeded through patience, stability, and an almost boring consistency. It's a lesson that applies far beyond real estate. The psychology of their success is also worth examining. Kalpesh Patel came from a culture that views business not as a means to personal glory, but as a family obligation. In many Western narratives, entrepreneurship is romanticized as an individual achievement, the lone genius who builds something from nothing. But the Indian business tradition, particularly in Gujarat, treats entrepreneurship as a collective endeavor spanning generations. This mindset fundamentally changes your decision-making. When you're not trying to build something to sell in 5 years or to build your personal brand, you make different choices. You prioritize stability over growth. You reinvest profits instead of distributing them. You think in decades and centuries instead of quarters and years. The Patel family also benefits from a cultural emphasis on financial literacy, numeracy. Gujarat has a long history of merchants and traders. Mathematics, accounting, and financial strategy are taught from childhood. Kalpesh didn't hire an MBA to manage his finances. He understood spreadsheets, tax implications, and leveraged finance himself. His children grew up learning about cap rates, cash-on-cash returns, and internal rates of return the way other kids learned about sports statistics. This financial fluency gave them an enormous advantage. They could evaluate deals that other investors overlooked because they actually understood the numbers. There's also the question of why other Indian immigrant families haven't replicated the Patel formula. The answer is that many have tried, but few have succeeded at this scale. The Patel family's particular combination of timing, location, capital access, and decision-making was somewhat unique. They arrived in Texas before the state's population boom became inevitable. They had enough capital from their motel business to survive downturns and capitalize on opportunities. They made aggressive moves at the exact right moments, like buying in Austin before the tech boom. And crucially, they had the discipline to avoid mistakes that would have derailed them. No major scandals, no bad investments that forced liquidation. No family feuds that split the operation. That consistency compounds over decades in ways that most people don't appreciate. The regulatory environment in Texas has also been crucial to their success. Texas has relatively light regulation compared to other states, particularly around real estate and business formation. The state's ability to establish limited liability companies and complex trust structures made it easy for the Pels to organize their empire in ways that protected assets and minimized tax exposure. In more heavily regulated states, their growth might have been hindered by environmental reviews, labor regulations, or corporate disclosure requirements. Texas's libertarian approach to business governance provided the perfect environment for a family that wanted to build big and stay hidden. Looking forward, the Patel family faces both opportunities and challenges that most people don't see coming. On the opportunity side, Texas's population is projected to grow by another 10 million people over the next 30 years. That growth will require enormous amounts of housing, office space, medical facilities, and infrastructure. The Patels are positioned to capture a significant portion of that development. They have the capital, the relationships, and the land bank to become even larger. Some analysts estimate that their portfolio could be worth $10 billion or more within 2 decades if they continue their current trajectory. But challenges are brewing beneath the surface. Rising interest rates make financing more expensive. The political environment around immigration and foreign investment is becoming more complex. Environmental regulations are tightening, particularly around water usage in areas where the Patels own property. Younger generation family members might have different priorities than their parents. Some might want to sell assets and pursue other interests. Keeping a family unified around a multi-generational business vision is harder than it looks. Many family empires fracture in the second or third generation because children have different values or different visions for the future. The Patel family has also benefited from being somewhat anonymous, but that shield is weakening. As their real estate footprint becomes more obvious and as more journalists dig into ownership structures, their privacy will become harder to maintain. Already, real estate databases and property records make it possible to see the extent of their holdings. Reddit users have started connecting the dots. Local reporters occasionally write about the mysterious investors behind certain developments. At some point, more mainstream media will tell their story. When that happens, their carefully cultivated invisibility will be gone forever. They'll face scrutiny on taxes, labor practices, environmental impact, and political influence. Some of that scrutiny could be uncomfortable. There's also the question of what they'll do with their wealth as it continues to grow. Kalpesh is in his 70s now. He's beginning to think about legacy in ways that extend beyond business. Some billionaires establish foundations, others become philanthropists, others pursue political ambitions. The Patels will likely do something more modest and more private. They might establish an educational trust. They might quietly become major donors to Indian cultural organizations. They might acquire agricultural land and preserve it for future generations. Whatever they do, it will probably be done with minimal fanfare and maximum legal protection. The Patel story also raises uncomfortable questions about wealth inequality and property concentration. In many ways, their success comes at the expense of ordinary Texans. They own the land that young professionals must pay rent on. They own the buildings that small businesses lease from. They own the warehouses that distribute goods people buy. Their quiet monopoly on essential infrastructure in Texas means that a significant portion of every dollar spent on rent or commercial space flows back to the Patel family. This isn't unique to them. It's true of all large property owners. But it's a reminder that behind every decision about where to live or work, there's often a family like the Patels extracting value from the transaction. Yet at the same time, the Patel family has provided jobs, sponsored developments, and contributed to Texas's growth. They've built better buildings than would have existed otherwise. They've made properties more valuable and more functional. They've invested capital that other investors wouldn't have risked. The value they've created is real. It's just been accumulated into private hands rather than distributed broadly. The Patel family's story will continue to unfold over the coming years and decades. Their children are now old enough to shape the direction of the business. Their grandchildren are being born and raised with wealth and opportunity that their great-grandfather Kalpesh could never have imagined. The real question is not whether they'll remain rich. They will. The question is whether they'll remain invisible.